Welcome, comrades, to the Red Review. My name is Daniel. I'll be your host today. I use he, him pronouns. Like usual, I'm coming to you from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. That is to say, Takaranto. All the people that work on the Red Review, all members of Socialist Action, live and work on stolen Indigenous land from across Turtle Island. So we say, land back. We say there can be no reconciliation without restitution, which includes seizing the assets of the major resource corporations and returning them to the commons. Last week, Emily and I talked about the anti-mandate convoy, talked about its class nature, what's fueling this reactionary movement, and who ought to respond to it. And there was a lot that we didn't get to talk about. So today we're releasing a bonus episode. This one is going to be a bit more informal, where I'm talking with one of our longtime comrades from the West Coast, Yvonne, who lives in Vancouver. Yvonne is a member of Socialist Action, one of our leaders, and we're going to be talking about what the anti-mandate convoy looked and felt like on the ground in Vancouver and in Toronto. We'll be sharing some links to photos that Yvonne took out in Vancouver when the convoy descended, and I'll be sharing in this episode today some audio recordings from that same movement in Toronto. Tune in next week for our winter review. We'll be covering the months of December into March, the season of winter, and some of the big trends. Before we get into this conversation with Yvonne, I want to give a shout out to some of our listeners. The last 5 episodes, we've had clusters of listeners from Thunder Bay, Ontario, Burnaby, British Columbia, Gatineau, Quebec, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Grand Prairie, Alberta. Even though most of our listenership is based in Canada, we also have some loyal international listeners. So to those listening from Amsterdam, from Bratislava, from Abu Dhabi, from Nairobi, from Istanbul, or wherever you may be on this planet, we appreciate you listening. We do what we do here to start conversations, to share our analysis, and to build community and to build up the movement. So thank you. And lastly, to the person that listens to every episode from Reno, Nevada, we see you. And just a content warning, the first recording from the anti-mandate convoy that will be playing right after this warning is really quite loud and very noisy with a lot of blaring horns. So if you're sensitive to loud, very noisy environments, I would recommend skipping ahead 30 seconds to the 3-minute and 30-second mark. Yvonne, welcome back to the podcast.
It's good to be back.
Only our most devout listeners will remember, but you were on our first ever episode back in May of 2020. And now you're back again for a very similar type of segment. We're going to go to you for reporting from the ground, what happened in Vancouver, what happened locally there with the anti-mandate convoy. Emily and I talked last week about some of the actions in Toronto and Ottawa, but we're going to you, what happened in Vancouver. Start us off. When did you find out in Vancouver that an anti-mandate convoy would be coming to town?
So I heard about it. You know, they have these little plans and they're putting up posters and things on poles. And I didn't really think that it would be anything really super overwhelming. And so I had a photo shoot booked that day and it was about 45 minutes away. And so I was on my way driving to that photo shoot, and the opposite side of the road, like going into town, was packed with trucks, all with these Canadian flags. And as I was driving, I was like, oh my God, like it went on for miles and miles and miles. There was just like hundreds, if not thousands of trucks with these Canadian flags all honking. And every bridge that I passed underneath, there was people on the bridge with banners and Screw Trudeau kind of thing.
Wow.
And so I called my photo shoot because it was like a collaboration. I wasn't getting paid for it. And I was just like, hey, like, I think I actually have to like go and photograph this because I mean, I'm a hobby photojournalist. I do it on the side. I don't really make any money off of it at all, but it felt like something that was very important to document. And so my photo shoot was very understanding. They had another photographer and stuff there. So that didn't matter too much. And I turned around and I drove all the way back to Vancouver, like 45 minutes back into Vancouver.
Wow.
It was just this moment of like, oh, okay, this is actually like way bigger than I thought it was going to be and way more impactful politically, unfortunately.
And were these then pickup trucks or were these the bigger long haul trucks?
All kinds. There was a lot of large trucks, but it was mostly pickup trucks, mostly people from like Langley and Maple Ridge and I think south of the border as well.
Oh, really? People were coming up over the border as well?
Yeah, that was the impression that I got, especially once I got on site at the event.
Yeah, okay, so I want to talk about that then because I also walked through the anti-mandate convoy in Toronto. And so what are you experiencing through your head as you're heading back into the center of the city or wherever they're congregating as you're going in? And I'm assuming it's getting more loud, maybe more crowded. What's going through your head?
You know, when I had been driving out, I drove down Main Street and Broadway, which is kind of near my house. And so I had seen like some trucks honking and stuff like that. By the time I got back after driving out and coming back, it felt like every car on the road was involved in the convoy in some way or another. And I felt like very alone almost. So I parked my car, take transit downtown. I'm not going to try and drive downtown when that's going on. And just the pedestrians, like there was this kind of adversarial relationship between the pedestrians and the convoy. Like there's people like giving the finger and shouting. And then the truckers and things are like shouting back. People in the convoy are yelling and heckling people in the streets. And it was like, it was very intense and very like visually and emotionally overwhelming or acoustically overwhelming. I think car horns are my least favorite sound ever. So I get on the train and I'm like kind of looking on Twitter and I put out a tweet being like, where are they winding up? Like, are they art gallery? Are they hospital? Are they town hall? Right. So apparently it was art gallery. I head downtown. There's people on the bus. There's people on the train who have these big Canadian flags. Like, you know, the Canadian flag looks almost like a dog whistle at this point.
So I was going to ask though, because in Toronto, you would see Canadian flags at both counter demonstrations and demonstrations. It seems like a moment in history where that symbol is undergoing some sort of reckoning. And I think people are now realizing that the nationalism behind the flag, we shouldn't be so comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like by the time I got downtown, there's a bunch of people standing on the street with the flags. There's like a congregation. And I don't think they ever like congealed in one place, but all along all the streets downtown, there's like people waving these flags and dressed in flags. And like, it looked like Canada Day. You know, how Canada Day looked before there was this big reckoning with the Indigenous genocide, right?
Yeah.
Back in like the early 2000s when everybody's wearing red. It was like that. It was so twisted and disturbing because it's like, even Canada Day is dark now, but this is like the dark Canada Day, you know, like they're celebrating their right to endanger vulnerable people, essentially, and being so proud and excited. And there's just like frothing at the mouth. You can tell that these people have never had an opportunity to engage in a protest before, but maybe have always thought that it looks fun, but never agreed with what's being protested. They're like taking their moment.
I have to say that was the same thing I felt in Toronto. And I'm going to ask you what the most common things you heard in Vancouver. In Toronto, the most common chant by far was freedom. Just people constantly ringing freedom through the loudspeakers, on the streets spontaneously. But that's what scared me actually the most. I don't disagree with the tactic. Obviously, we engage in that tactic all the time. But seeing the far right mobilize in this way, I know that when I was in my first ever protest, my first ever rallies, you get shivers up your spine, goosebumps on your skin. That feeling of camaraderie. You're standing shoulder to shoulder with someone in a struggle for your version of justice. And seeing them experience it, I know that those people now are going to come back stronger because they formed those connections with each other. Is that what you were getting there as well?
That's exactly what I was getting. And it was like the anti-version of all the protests that I've been to, you know, with the signs and banners and old ladies handing out little pamphlets and stickers and pins and, you know, the whole thing. You know, there's very few protests that I've been to that I don't agree with what they're protesting. And this was one of them. And it was very strange.
Was this the first time you were outnumbered at a protest?
I've photographed the anti-vaccine protests a few times. So no, it wasn't. But I've always had a mask on previously. And for this one, I had actually just gotten over COVID. So I was immune. And so I wanted to try to interact with the crowd without a mask.
Try and blend in a bit.
Yeah, blend in a bit. And like, you know, I'm not wearing a Canadian flag or anything like overtly, but just that sign that I'm not wearing a mask is enough for some people to accept me. And I was interested to see how they would treat me if I'm not an outsider, you know? It was extremely different. It was night and day previously when I was photographing those protests, they see me as a person from the media and they hate the media, right? I've got this big long lens on my camera.
Yeah.
They just see me as the enemy. And so I got all these pictures of them jeering and shouting and like looking grotesquely angry at me. And those pictures sell very well, let me tell you. But the ones that I got at the truckers convoy were people smiling, holding up banners. You know, it felt wholesome, but then it's got this like extremely corrupted aspect where all the signs are kind of vicious things, calling Trudeau the R word and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting. I didn't see that one here. But yeah, a lot of very explicitly anti-Trudeau messaging.
Violently, too. Like, I don't like Trudeau, but I don't want him to like go to jail and die.
Again, the tactic, and even at that very high level, the slogan of freedom or, you know, fuck Trudeau. I've chanted fuck Trudeau at a climate rally before.
Yeah.
Trudeau is a traitor. But again, seeing it packaged in what is, in my view, and Emily and I talked about it last week, a eugenicist message, one where my personal freedom to go anywhere in society I wish without any restrictions, even though that means that people that are immunocompromised, elderly, disabled, and again, mostly impoverished, racialized communities that bear the brunt of this, they will die. And that's okay. That's just almost like this free market extended to our own immune systems, right? Like whatever, everybody can do whatever they want. Wow.
I was just going to say one of the slogans that I saw a lot was, my rights don't end where your fear begins. It's eugenicist because it's like, well, it should. It's the same argument with gun control. I have a fear of being killed by a gun, so you're right to hold a gun and that ends. I'm sorry, like you don't get to carry a deadly weapon, right? Like, and that's essentially what it is with COVID. If you have this virus, you do have what is essentially a deadly weapon. And I am in every right to be afraid of that. And you have no rights to spread that.
No, and especially when it comes to things like, you know, it's your decision to get vaccinated or not. So if you're vaccinated, you're safe. And if you didn't get vaccinated, that's your choice. But the numbers now in Canada, given how many vaccines have been administered, there are more immunocompromised people than unvaccinated people. And they don't get that choice. Mm-hmm. And contrary to what some people might think, if you're immunocompromised, you may still need to work at a Walmart to pay your bills. Mm-hmm. And if there are no mask requirements, no vaccine mandate, you can try and do that all yourself. But especially if you're immunocompromised, you're essentially a sitting duck. And the prioritization is business as normal. They want to return to normal, but it's really not a normal when the virus is still there. It's business as normal, ignoring the impacts of the virus. Okay, so you're seeing a lot of anti-Trudeau messaging. You're seeing these chants for freedom, and you're seeing people jubilant. It was a celebration because on that day in Toronto, they won. Our counter-protest was way smaller than theirs and was way less energetic. To be honest, the anti-mandate protest in Toronto, which really only lasted the one day, because in Toronto, anarchists blocked their main artery downtown to get to the parliament. And so they basically set up in the middle of the street and they got cleared a few days later. And really their numbers weren't sustained because they didn't get to their central destination where they'd be able to kind of stay in front of parliament. And that wasn't the police. That was really, you know, anti-fascist anarchist organizers. So what happened in Vancouver then? Did they get entrenched anywhere? Was there any coordinated response against that in the community?
Yeah, well, so the first day, I think it took all of us kind of by surprise. Like I said, I wasn't expecting anywhere near that size. So no, there wasn't much of a coordinated response. I couldn't find any opposition at all the first day. But the following week, you know, they did it every Saturday for a few weeks. And the following week, there was this really excellent group of, I think, older environmentalists on bicycles. And they blocked off key routes along the road using these bicycles. Just a shout out to a fellow photographer, Ryan Walter Wagner. He is a photojournalist and he took a bunch of pictures of truckers getting in confrontations with these bicyclists.
Yeah.
They're very powerful images. You know, it really shows the tensions on both sides. Just one thing that you mentioned, the police. Yeah, they don't do anything. And in fact, I actually had to open a ticket at one point with the Vancouver Police Department because I was photographing one of these anti-mask, anti-vaccine protests a while ago. And I saw a bunch of policemen there without masks on. There was like 10 policemen, all of them just chilling, hanging out with the protesters, standing near them.
Just hanging out.
Not wearing masks. I took pictures of the policemen standing next to signs that said really violent things about the vaccine. So I sent those pictures in to the police department. I was like, hey, like these are your officers and they're interacting with the most vulnerable communities, like on the downtown east side, people who are suffering from addiction, people who have disabilities, and these police are in close contact with those people. So they need to figure that out, basically. And the response that I got was very underwhelming. It was just, if they're outside, then they don't have to wear a mask, basically.
In Toronto, I've very seldomly seen any police officers with masks, even during peaks.
Yeah. The only time I ever see them in a mask was at the Black Lives Matter protests last summer. And I guess that's because they wanted to like make a point or something. Like, it's obviously not because they actually think that the masks are necessary, because if they thought that, they would be wearing them all the time.
So I'll say my experience with police that day, I made a number of bad decisions because you went in, it seems very organized. Okay, it was kind of a last minute decision, but you weren't wearing a mask. You were more covert. I was coming out from the counter demonstration that had about 1,000 people. So I was feeling a little bit more confident because there was some sort of resistance. But really, in our case, our side was not as organized. The people leading it were not very experienced. I wanted to walk through theirs to see, relatively speaking, what the balance of forces was. But I did smoke a joint before I went in there. I still wore my mask and I was also wearing my jacket with all of my buttons. And I didn't tell anybody. I was completely by myself. And really, as I was walking into it, at first I felt fine because I saw what were the remnants of the protests at the park, at Queen's Park, where the provincial parliament is. But then I noticed everybody was walking north. They were walking to where the trucks were stopped by the anarchists and the anti-fascists. And that's where they're now congregating. That's where all the big trucks were. And it was kind of weird. I could have turned around so many times, but I was actually agape, and I was almost glad I was wearing a mask because I think the fear would have been palpable just in my mouth drop. Thousands of people, they were chanting. They had way more energy than we did and just walking through it. No one else was wearing a mask. I didn't see any at Toronto. I didn't see any swastikas or anything. Did you see anything like that in Vancouver?
One lady was dressed up like a Canadian version of a Nazi, and her point was oh, we fought the Nazis, we're gonna do it again. And it's I think you're just taking an opportunity to dress up like a Nazi.
Yes, it's literally depending on who you're in the room with, your explanation for your attire is changing.
Yeah, really, that's what it felt like. And then a lot of people wearing stars.
Oh, really? You saw people wearing the actual
Star of David?
I did not see any of that either. I saw a lot of the "Don't Tread on Me" flags.
Oh, we saw that
and,
too. Yeah.
The "Fuck Trudeau" flags. Hey comrades, another quick content warning. There'll be about a minute of recording from an anti-mandate convoy that's quite loud and noisy. If you want to skip that, fast forward to 18 minutes and 10 seconds into the podcast.
Do violent slogans count as threats when the person said 18 wheels to flatten the turd? Indicating, you run over someone you don't like with an 18-wheeler, the turd.
Who said that?
Someone walking by. I didn't see them. 18 wheels to Trudeau, that's what they call him. 18 wheels to flatten a turd. They're referring to the Prime Minister. As in they're threatening through a slogan to kill the Prime Minister. Just saying. I'm not sure if that's something relevant to tell your boss.
It's gone. Bloor Street is gone now. I have to let them know.
And I only heard one violent threat, but it was very interesting because I was right next to a police officer when this person said it. And it's a bit of a meme, but 18 wheels to flatten a turd. Have you heard that one before?
No, but that's so scary.
It is.
And it's so dumb.
It's
they're
so
so
dumb.
dumb. Their whole turdo thing is so dumb.
It is. It's dumb. And this was right next to the police officer. And also, I have all this recorded on audio. So I was walking through with my tape recorder. I'm like, I'm going to record this. I'm going to capture the atmosphere. I'm going to share it with as many people as I know, because I think that atmosphere really does capture what this is. The People's Party of Canada is around 12 to 15% in polling right now. 12 to 15% of Canadians are explicitly aligned with this movement, right? The PPC was the only party that was against mandates, against any of that. And so it's becoming this big thing. But when you hear 12%, you don't think that's a big deal necessarily. I mean, we do. We understand what 12% of the people is in terms of mobilization. We would be lucky to have 12% people mobilizing in a similar extreme way on the left.
Yeah.
But when you hear even just thousands of people chanting all these things and people shouting, 18 wheels to flatten the turd, just openly calling for violence against the sitting prime minister, even if it is a meme, even if it's a joke threat. I know that if someone at a Black Lives Matter protest did the same thing, it wouldn't be the same thing. So I was just finishing talking with this police officer, like, what is your plan? Like, we knew this was coming. They came to Toronto after Ottawa. We knew this was happening and we knew what was happening there. And this guy just, we were stopping them from getting to the park. I'm like, yeah, but that's not where they're trying to go anymore. They're setting up shop right there in that busy intersection. And what's your plan if things get violent? Like, I don't know. And I pointed out the hypocrisy. I vented a bit at this cop who just let me do this. I almost felt it could have been an intentional thing on the police. This person did not seem very experienced. I'm wondering if they were sending their least experienced police officers to deal with this. And then when there's a Black Lives Matter protest or they're clearing an encampment, they're sending their most sadistic, people like they're signing up for that shift. Like, yes, please, I want in for that one, coach. But for this one, all those people didn't want to go there because they don't want to treat these people poorly. So they have to send in their rookies. And that's what this person seemed like. So then I heard this threat and I go back to the cop. Well, okay, do threats of violence count? And I have to explain what this means to him as well. He didn't understand what 18 wheels to flatten the turd meant. So I'm like, okay, so turd, Trudeau, Trudeau, that's the prime minister.
Like it's written on all their cars.
Yeah. So that's one. 18 wheels, well, that's the 18 wheelers. That should be pretty straightforward. And then to flatten, well, that means to crush someone with a truck, right?
Put those two together, And
then I wrapped it up as like it's a satire on, to flatten the curve. But you can hear the police officer say, like, it's gone. Bloor Street is gone, which was the main street we're on. And he goes to his car and he calls it in. I'm like the police had no plan. Ultimately, the police have a lot of jurisdiction over how they enforce the law. And when it comes to these people, well, they're kind of in line with them because the anti-mandate people are fighting for, white privilege, able-bodied privilege, led by small business owners, so wealthier people or at least higher up in the caste system. Mm-hmm. And that's who the police are meant to protect, regardless of what the law says.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why I like taking these photos, is because it shows areas of contrast. Yeah. So at an environmentalist protest I was at a little while ago where they took the bridge, there was literally like less than 100 environmentalist protesters, and they sent 67 police officers. So it was almost a 1-to-1 ratio of demonstrators. People were like looking at those pictures like, well, what the hell was going on? Like, why did they send so many police? Did somebody die? And it's like, no, nothing. There was nothing dangerous going on. They took a bridge. That's it. Trucker convoys took the entire downtown. I saw cops standing on the side of the roads, right? Just milling about. Not very many, by the way, but people were like literally standing on the tops of moving vehicles. And the police were just like, oh, get down. Oh, careful. Like not even like chasing after them. Like that on its own is very illegal. Like that is almost an arrestable offense. And you're just going to ignore it completely.
So what I compared it to in Toronto, the most police I saw firsthand in Toronto was at a Palestine march. And we marched to Bloor and Yonge, which is just a few blocks to the east of where these people were occupying. Our crowds were maybe a similar size. Ours had way fewer vehicles. We literally had one pickup truck that was leading the march. And when we got to where the Israeli consulate is at the intersection, they had snipers on the roof. They had cops on horseback.
Oh my God.
Someone called in a bomb threat saying that the truck had a bomb and that they were going to bomb the consulate. So the police tried to stop us. They tried to confiscate the vehicle, bring it back to do the search. But again, to the credit of these Palestinian organizers from the Palestinian youth movement, they spoke directly to the crowd, let them know everything that was happening. They said, we're not going to let the cops stop us. So we have the right to do this. And to the police, they said, if you want to search the truck, okay, but you can search it here in front of everybody while we film you. Because we know there isn't a bomb in here. You can verify that very quickly, and then we're going to keep going. And the police didn't even bother to check. But by the time we got to that intersection, again, snipers. And they literally had a sniper on the roof of the Hudson's Bay store there, which I thought was a great metaphor for the colonial history of Canada.
Yeah, it really is, eh?
And then the same thing, even more aggressive with this anti-mandate convoy. And again, just a small handful of police, mostly protecting the museum, actually. They're like guarding the entrance to one of the museums as if these people are going to like jump in there and start doing, I don't know. So the blatant hypocrisy, and to me, it reveals really who the police are meant to protect.
Absolutely. One of the comments that I've seen on like online discourse on like the r/Vancouver subreddit and stuff is like, oh, well, would you prefer that the police send out like hundreds of police officers to like arrest all the people in this convoy? And it's like, no, I don't want to see this disparity. I don't want to see hundreds of police officers out for like 12 environmentalists.
Exactly.
I want people to have the right to protest. I want the police response to be appropriate, and I want it to be equal. Yeah. Like seeing this blatant double standard is what is upsetting. Yeah. It's not the lack of police officers or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to see no police officers at all. That's the whole point.
So like Emily and I were talking, we're not here to denounce the tactics. And that was what was really troubling with the media discourse. It was this, manufacturing a discontent with the tactic of any sort of blockade, any sort of occupation, when really that's our only recourse.
Yeah.
And so we're not demanding for the police to do it because we know if the police shut them down, they would do the same thing to us 10 times over. We want to see the community mobilize against and keep their own community safe, and to show that the anti-mandate convoy actually isn't the majority. Even if the PPC is 15%, even if 30% of people are somewhat sympathetic to some of the demands or ideas of the anti-mandate convoy, it's not the majority. They're just out organizing us by a lot.
Yeah.
And getting the police involved isn't going to fix that problem. I want to ask then, so the environmentalists on bike, was this entirely spontaneous? Are they associated with any group? Where did that come from? Do you know the story behind that organizing?
Yeah, so I wasn't privy to any of the organizing, but as far as I understand it, there was like a big Discord group. And so they had kind of just added people to it over the course of the week. I think it was very spontaneous. And then everybody with a bike showed up, and then they were messaging the Discord group. I got added to it midway through the day, messaging the Discord group like where the next location was. So, the truckers would reroute, and so all the bicyclists would coordinate and go and wind up blocking their next route.
Wow.
And they moved around I think 4 or 5 different places throughout the city. That seemed like a really heartening and encouraging kind of counter protest. And I also love just the visual metaphor of trucks versus bikes. I think that really summarizes the right versus left, at least in terms of environmental impact.
Environmental impact, and really in terms of resources, the money that gets funneled into the anti-mandate convoy because it aligns with some business interests is really, stark compared to our own crowd-funded efforts on the left,
Yeah.
It's mostly our bodies that we have, and then in some cases, bikes. Okay, so what is Vancouver looking like these days? So have those weekly blockades stopped?
Yeah, thankfully. Although I feel like I have a stress response now every time I hear a car horn. I'm just oh God, is it starting again? But no, I haven't seen any of them since I was downtown on a Saturday recently, and there was nothing. There's stickers everywhere, anti-mask stickers and stuff like that, but more or less I think they've kind of tired themselves out for now.
Yeah, and I have to say those stickers as well are expensive compared to what we do on our end with wheat paste and things like that. Yeah, I think it needs to be said, they're not in the streets anymore, but that as an opening salvo, as their opening introduction to that type of action is what scares me, and the fact that they do have a sizable chunk of the population. Were you following what was happening in Ottawa with the Battle of Billings Bridge?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to CBC every morning, so I was definitely at least getting the CBC take, which it seemed pretty terrifying, frustrating also that the police were so hesitant to do absolutely anything.
And literally, it kind of showed with those people, again, kind of on bikes and just with their own bodies. They took over for the police that day. They're the ones that negotiated the release of the trucks that they blocked, which involved them taking their supplies, their fuel canisters, because they were going to refuel. The police weren't willing to do that, but they kind of stood by as the community did it. That really is the way forward. We are the answer we've been waiting for. Is it dangerous? Yeah, absolutely. You can't ignore the fact that there aren't risks. But I think what the conclusion a lot of people are coming to is it's riskier not to do anything.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're in this kind of position in society right now where none of us have really ever taken that kind of a risk before, or been placed in a position where that kind of a risk in terms of civil disobedience is necessary. And increasingly, things are getting to the point where we have to start weighing that kind of risk and asking ourselves if we're the kind of people who are willing to take action regardless of the risks.
Hey, comrades, I wanted to share another audio clip from the day the anti-mandate convoy came to Toronto. This is a quick interview I did with Pam, a member of OBSU, on the role that Labour is playing in countering the anti-mandate convoy and the role that Labour ought to be playing.
I'm Pam from OBSU.
Wonderful. And so, Pam, what role does Labour play in protecting workers?
That you can see from the flags here today, the fact that this was put out by multiple Labour bodies, that it happened quite quickly, but that it is the response of individual Labour members, union members, putting pressure on the leadership. That really is the key and what makes the difference.
So the response to protecting workers is a grassroots, bottom-up, rank-and-file thing.
Well, it is, and then hopefully it also then will get the leadership to move, because, the trade union isn't separate from capitalism, but it is a real advance historically for workers. It's a mass organization of workers. And the moments when the trade union leadership come together from different sectors, the moments when they, put the call out to all their members are moments when we've seen amazing things happen. And the possibility for that now is really, I think, clear. But also, it requires active members, right? You can't just wait for the leader to do something.
Absolutely. In OBSU, you have Smokey Thomas.
Not for long.
Not for long. He's not rerunning, hopefully this time for sure.
Oh, he's definitely not. Yeah, he's definitely stepped down. So it's a real opportunity for our union. And
Absolutely.
certainly in terms of leaders like Smokey, like Jerry Diaz and Unifor, it is a leadership that was allowed to sort of create a more top-down unionism when the level of struggle was lower.
Yes.
And so those people are in trouble. They're in trouble in the U.S. The Jimmy Hoffa Junior machine got kicked out of the Teamsters. The CAW or the UAW in the U.S. now is voting directly for their leader. So there is pressure also to change the leadership at the top,
Absolutely.
which is beautiful.
Have you heard any of this rhetoric on the West Coast? Because it was kind of prevalent here from the people that ought to be leading these counter struggles. You know, the NDP and the labor unions, they're the ones on the left who are resourced. They're the ones that should be not only supporting mutual aid and other things like that, but they're the ones that should be mobilizing to keep the community safe and blocking these anti-mandate convoys and outnumbering them. They're the ones that can do it. Yet in Ottawa and Toronto, a lot of the labor leaders didn't want to do anything because they were citing, it's not safe, especially for our Black and Indigenous members. They kind of talk about the privilege of being able to protest or counter protest. And it seemed to me almost this type of historical revisionism. No, you got it backwards. Like, the people that are at most risk have the most to lose by not doing anything. There's a reason why the Indigenous land defenders around the world are the ones that take these big steps, and they take on the most risk because they have the most to lose. You got it completely inverted, and you're trying to tell us that you, as the person that gets paid six figures to lead this union, the reason why you're not doing anything is because, Black and Indigenous person in the union. First of all, we're not advocating for conscription.
No.
We're not advocating that all people in the union be forced to go to the front lines and fight, but you can mobilize and you can find the people. You can find the allies who might not be at most risk themselves, but are willing to stand up for their community. But the leaders completely absolve themselves of any responsibility in organizing that pushback. And that's why in Ottawa, with the Battle of Billings Bridge, that was like a small handful of union activists. It wasn't the unions. It were people within the unions. And similarly in Toronto, and it seems like in Vancouver as well, it was small, under-resourced people who won the day, really.
And I mean, I think that's how it's always going to be. I haven't heard much rhetoric. I know that my own union has made very similar statements of, we support the pro-vaccine movement and we condemn the anti-vaxxers, and that's about it. I mean, even in some cases leaving their own staff out to dry in terms of handling all of the grievances related to vaccine terminations, but that's its own thing. I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, I have my own frustrations there.
The last audio recording I want to share with you all is from one of the doctors who organized the Defense of Healthcare rally on February 5th. His name is Dr. Philip Berger, and he shared a sentiment that I believe a lot of people in the community were feeling.
We were constantly warned about the threat of violence today. We've had colleagues who are afraid to come down here, but we say it's because of those threats and intimidation that we are here. We will not tolerate a state of siege. Healthcare workers will come to work without the threat of intimidation. We are here today because our patients need to know that they'll not have to navigate road closures when they have to get to the hospital if they're in pain. They need to know that in their most vulnerable moments, when they're lying in these buildings around us, they'll not be tormented by the persistent honking of horns. People need to know they'll not be threatened for simply wearing masks. We're not here today. We're here today because we know that access to healthcare is a right. We will not live under a siege, and that's why we're here today. Thank you, everyone. All right.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
No, absolutely.
Anytime you need a photojournalist.
Absolutely. And if you have some photos, send them our way, and maybe we can use one for the promotion for this bonus episode.
Absolutely, I will do that. I would love to do that.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Comrade Yvonne, and you're always welcome back.
No problem, Comrade Danny. I appreciate that a lot.
That brings us to the end of this bonus episode of the Red Review. I really hope you enjoyed our Tales from the Street, and remember to tune in next week for the Winter Review, where we'll be breaking down major trends in this state from the last 3 months. We're all excited for the warmer spring weather. I'm looking forward to being able to bask in the sun while drinking in the park. You can always reach out to us at redreview@protonmail.com. Or you can connect with Socialist Action on Twitter, on Instagram, or on Facebook, and you can check out our website and YouTube channel. In particular, I invite you to check out our recent celebration of International Women's Day, where women comrades from coast to coast and internationally shared their perspective on the women's struggle today. You can find that on our YouTube channel. Take care, comrades. Stay safe, stay active, and see you next time. See you next time. See you next time.